Grüß, willkommen in einem and in a Fragens video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 20 of my battle series. In this video, I'll cover the Battle of Deutsche Wagram, which occurred on the 5th and 6th of July 1809, with some of the critical manoeuvring that occurred earlier also included. As with my other battle series of videos, this is not designed as a historical video per se, it's designed to assist players in creating scenarios. As a result, my emphasis is on the units and what they did in the battle rather than any in-depth analysis of why General X did whatever he was supposed to have done or not done. This shows the strategic situation at the beginning of the war. Most of the critical battles occurred along the Danube, as you can see here. After the initial Austrian advance was halted, they retreated to Vienna and crossed over to the north bank. I'll not be covering any of the events leading up to the battle, particularly any conflicts. This Russian language map shows the battle as well, which, if correct, indicate the Austrians did get rather close to the bridges that Napoleon relied for supply, something we'll cover as we cover the battle itself. This map from the Military History and Atlas of the Napoleonic War is what I'll be generally using for this video. This shows the position at 10:30 hours in the morning, obviously. The next map in the series shows the position at 1300 hours. This is a simpler map which gives us a clearer view of the French response to the Austrian threat to its left flank and the French attack on its right flank. It was difficult finding maps which showed how Napoleon got into this position, and while this map is reasonably clear, it does not show the whole picture. While Napoleon got the correct strategy, he was spending a lot of time responding to the Austrian moves, which he did not appear to expect in many ways. This is a stylized version of the battle. While useful in understanding where the formations were, it's not so helpful in terms of finding out what the terrain is. This map provides us with a more detailed view of the battle, although the course of the battle is difficult to understand based on this map. The arrows gives us a good view of the moves of the formations, but not when they moved. Using the West Point maps, I created my own version for this video. This is the map I'll be using for the analysis of this battle. Vienna is in the bottom left corner. Let's now look at the opposing forces. When I first thought about going over the structure of the various army, I ended up with about 60 slides showing the structure of the armies down to battalion, squadron and battery level. This is clearly overkill, so I simplified the TO&E for the video. My primary source was near Horster, but I did make some minor changes based on other sources and references as well. There was a lot of unit swapping occurring, and the TO&E did depend on when it was supposed to depict the forces in terms of time. If anyone is interested in my detailed analysis, you can find it in my Napoleonic TO&E white paper on my IO Group's Kriegsspiel site. Let's now drill into the formations. This shows the structure and the strength of the Guard and reverse cavalry corps. The cavalry in particular saw a lot of heavy fighting in this battle. Instead of using the commanders, I'll identify the formation by their corps numbers, or in some cases by their specific type, such as cavalry. I find that using commanders can be confusing, especially if the commander is relatively unknown. The French Second Corps consisted of 4 divisions, one of which was Portuguese, which I did find interesting, and a light cavalry brigade. The second adopted a defensive posture for the bulk of the second day, although at the end of the day it did provide support on the French right flank. The French Third Corps was the largest in the French army, consisting of 4 infantry divisions and 4 cavalry brigades, 2 being light and 2 being heavy. The Third Corps was the key to French victory, and its success was, more than anything, the reason why the French prevailed on the day. The next largest corps was the French Fourth Corps, with 4 infantry divisions and 2 cavalry formations, 1 a brigade and 1 a division. All cavalry were light. While employed mainly in defence, it was the 4th which was subject to the bulk of the Austrian attacks on the second day. The French Ninth Corps contained the Saxon contingent, consisting of 3 infantry divisions and 2 cavalry brigades, 1 being heavy and 1 light. According to many historical accounts, it was the 9th withdrawal and extended reorganisation which threatened the French with disaster. I've always been puzzled why it spent so much time reorganising. The French 11th and 5th Corps consisted of only 2 infantry divisions. The 5th Corps had, unofficially, 2 additional divisions, the Italians and Bavarians, although the Bavarians were not involved in the battle itself. The 5th Corps was a key formation in stabilising the French centre. The 11th Corps was late in arriving on the battlefield and was mainly employed in supporting the 2nd Corps. The French 6th Corps from the Italian army consisted of 3 infantry divisions and a light cavalry brigade. The 6th Corps, along with the 2nd Corps, mainly had the job of pinning down the Austrian line until the 3rd Corps had won the battle. For simplicity, I'll be using these unit symbols on the maps. This represents the 5 corps on the left with their respective divisions. I'm not including the divisions on the map as it ends up making it very hard to see anything. I'll only be including the corps. This was a rather large battle, so it couldn't all fit on a single slide. The remaining 4 corps are listed here. The Austrians, while they had adopted the corps system, still retained corps-size advance guard formations. The 1st Corps consisted of 2 infantry divisions, which was rather small, although it saw heavy combat on the first day. The Austrian 2nd and 3rd Corps consisted of 3 infantry divisions each, along with reserve artillery. The battle contained a lot of artillery, with each corps consisting of between 54 and 60 guns each. The 3rd Corps was one of the 2 Austrian corps involved in the attack on the Austrian right flank. The Austrian 4th and 3rd Corps, while they consisted of 3 infantry divisions each, were smaller. The Austrians used Landwehr and other ad hoc units in their army in an attempt to form an army which could match the French, at least in numbers. The 6th Corps caused the French a lot of issues on the French left flank. However, in the end, a battle had been lost before it could cut off the French line of communication. The 4th Corps took the full brunt of the French attack and was forced back, sealing the fate of the Austrian army. It had the misfortune of launching an attack on time while the rest of the Austrian army was several hours late in their attack and suffered badly as a result. This was probably why it was forced back so easily from such a good defensive position. The final Austrian formation was a Grenadier Corps and a Cavalry Corps, with the cavalry containing a very large number of artillery guns. It was heavily engaged in the centre. This shows the simplified formation symbols for the Austrian army, which I'll be using in this particular case for the 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 4th Corps, as well as the advance guards. As with the French, this goes on to a second slide. While the Austrians were outnumbered, they still fielded a reasonably large army. This shows the 6th and the Reserve Corps. Let's now look at the course of the battle, which I must admit I had a real difficulty pinning down the details. I had major issues with the centre and exactly what occurred. As a result, this video is rather general for that particular sector of the battle. Let's start with the 3rd of July, 2200 hours, obviously the evening. The French moved onto Lobo Island, quickly clearing it of any Austrian forces in the evening of the 3rd. The Austrians were originally expected to fight close to the bridgehead and had prepared a number of positions there. However, Charles decided to defend the higher ground overlooking the Marchfeld. On the 4th of July at 1000 hours, this shows the position. The 4th Corps cleared a crossing point and moved advanced units across the river. That's the 4th French Corps. The Austrians were concerned the French would cross north of Vienna and kept forces well in the rear to cover that possibility. Charles also asked his brother John to prepare to move to support him, sending the order at 0700 hours. Due to bad weather, this was delayed by 23 hours, which meant John would not start moving until the morning of the 5th and would not arrive in time. This may well have been a key piece of bad luck, which resulted in the Austrian defeat. Also on the 4th of July at 12:30 hours, by nightfall, under the cover of violent thunderstorms that impeded any Austrian observation, Napoleon gave the order for the commencement of the crossing of operation. The French formed a line with 3 leading corps, the 2nd, 3rd and 4th, and the 9th and 6th, and the Guard moving up behind. On the 5th of July at 1400 hours, this shows the position. The French had completed their move across the river by the morning of the 5th. At 1300 hours, Napoleon ordered an advance with the 4th Corps pivoting left and the 2nd and 3rd Corps pivoting right. Napoleon ordered the 9th Corps and the 6th and 5th Corps, the 5th was the Army of Italy, into the gap, followed by the Guard. The Austrians did have a cavalry screen in place in front of the French. 1800 hours, on the 5th of July, this shows the position. The French army was in a position to now launch an attack, which they did. The Austrians managed to rally and force the French back. Meanwhile, the French 11th Corps was crossing the river. After being forced back, after their unsuccessful first attack, the French reorganised for the following day. The 9th Corps was withdrawn and reorganised, and the 11th Corps moved up to take its place. The rest of the army concentrated for an attack along the main Austrian defensive line. The Austrians moved the 8th and 3rd and Reserve Corps and planned on conducting a major push to cut off the French line of communication, with the 4th Corps conducting diversionary attacks. This shows the position on the second day of the main battle at 0400 hours in the morning. The Austrian 4th Corps launched its attack at 0400 hours. However, the Austrian right flank was delayed and the troops only began to form up for an attack at this time. The French 3rd Corps halted the Austrian attack and forced it back by 0600 hours, but not before Napoleon had moved the guard towards the French right flank. The Austrians had been forced back across the stream, and Napoleon ordered the French 3rd Corps to attack it. However, it needed 2 hours to reorganise itself and was not ready until 09:30 hours. At the same time, the French 9th Corps withdrew as it considered itself too exposed. Day 2, 07:30 hours, this shows the position. The withdrawal of the 9th Corps was a critical error on the French side, and the 4th Corps, seeing the danger, attempted to reoccupy the position. It managed to retake part of the position after 2 hours of fighting, but after an Austrian counterattack had to reorganise and launch a second attack to retake the position. Meanwhile, the Austrian 3rd and 6th Corps had begun their attack and were advancing against light French screening forces on the French left flank. At 09:30 hours on day 2, the French 3rd Corps launched its attack and managed to force the Austrians back over the stream on the French right flank. The 3rd Corps continued in this attack up the defensive positions, overwhelming the Austrian 4th Corps. On the other flank, the Austrian attack had forced back a French infantry division into its old bridgehead position, and the French line of communication was in danger. That's on the French left flank. By 10:30 hours on day 2, the French had secured its right flank and was advancing, but was in grave danger on its left flank. At 1100 hours, the Austrians had taken Aspen and was advancing on Essling, but the Austrian left flank was collapsing, so Charles had to focus on this flank and did not reinforce the successful 6th Corps offensive. He ordered the 2nd Corps to support the retreating 4th Corps on the Austrian left flank. The French, seeing the crisis on the left flank, ordered the 4th Corps south, supported by the Cavalry Corps and parts of the Guard. The 5th Corps was also ordered to fill in any gaps. By 12:30 hours on day 2, the 3rd French Corps had advanced through the Austrian defences and was threatening the Austrian left flank, causing the Austrian 4th Corps to retreat and the Austrian 2nd Corps to become disordered. On the French left flank, the French attack had secured the flank and the centre was holding against the Austrian attacks. By 1300 hours on day 2, the French 4th Corps had secured its lines of communication, the centre had held, and the French right flank was advancing against the retreating 2 Austrian corps. The battle had been won, although it was certainly not a decisive victory. Apart from the appearance of the Austrian-Italian army at 1600 hours, which caused a minor panic among the French, the Austrians retreated in good order, being pursued lightly by the French. Let's now look at some of the rules which players may consider to reproduce this particular battle. Due to the large size of the battle, I typically always list the following 3 rules which would be adequate to refight the battle. These are Bloody Big Napoleonic Battle, Napoleon at War, and the Age of Eagles. All 3 rules focus on providing a historically accurate experience, with the Age of Eagles being the most complete set of rules. The only minor issue with Age of Eagles is the scale. Be prepared to deploy a absurdly large playing area if you want to reproduce this battle. This shows the scenario deployment sheet for Napoleon at War, or what I call these days Grosse Schlachten, with the French at the bottom and the Austrians at the top. Other rules which you could consider are DBN and Blücher, however they do so in an abstract manner. These are good for a game, but not so good for reproducing a historical battle. Snappy Nappy would also fill into this category. There are other options which I've not personally attempted, but I suspect would also be suitable. They are Volley and Bayonet and Marshal of the Empire. And so this completes episode 20 of my battles video series, in this case covering the Battle of Deutsche Wagram. Alle guten Ding, kommen zu einem Ende.